Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Amanda Lamb. In today's deep dive conversation with Cullen Browder, we're going to talk about residential elevator safety, specifically as it involves children. Cullen, welcome to the program.
Good to be here.
First of all, can you take us back to July 2021 and tell us what happened to 7-year-old Weston Androw?
It's such a terrible, terrible story. So the Androw family from Ohio, they're down on the Outer Banks. They'd rented a large home on the beach in Corolla. They get there. Weston's out on the beach playing, making friends with strangers, just all over the place. Then he comes inside. He's exploring. And somehow he gets in between the inner and outer doors of the residential elevator and gets trapped and ultimately is crushed and died. And it's just a horrible, horrible situation.
And I'm guessing, the family, they're looking for him. They don't know where he is. They find him. They call 911.
And it's just too late. It's too late. He's dead on the scene, essentially.
And not something, both of our children are grown, but not something I would have thought about as a younger parent even.
No, it's a relatively new home, very modern, and these residential elevators are becoming more common, and they just can't find them all of a sudden, and then they discover the absolute worst thing they could find.
From your reporting, what did you find out about the frequency of these types of accidents?
Well, some of the numbers are conflicting, but the latest I've seen from the Consumer Product Safety Commission is that from 2018 to 21, a 4-year period, as many as 41 people killed, thousands of injuries. Those are not all children, and we're talking about a child's death here, but it just shows the risk there, the vulnerability. And there are various reasons why this could happen. Number one, these are not elevators that are inspected annually, like the commercial elevator you get on in a building downtown. And they're designed differently. Again, you've got the inner and outer doors, and there's that space in between where, unless there is something placed there, a child could fit.
And you mentioned this, but they're becoming more popular. So as our population ages, a lot of people want to live in a home with an elevator because they're concerned about stairs as they age, and they don't have, they don't want to live in a condo. They want to live in a house. So that's, I guess, another reason to take this really seriously.
Right, because some of these larger homes, we're not building out as much. Not a ranch style. You don't have as much property, so you build up, and you've got to get upstairs. And as you age, again, an elevator just makes a lot of sense, and particularly in a lot of these beach homes, these vacation homes that are rented out constantly, they're becoming very common.
So recently you had an opportunity to speak to Weston's parents. That had to be heartbreaking. What did they have to say?
Absolutely heartbreaking. And it's taken them since July of 2021 to this past week for them to even get to that point where they could have a conversation with a reporter like me. And it was interesting in that they still speak of Weston in present tense because he is absolutely in their hearts. And you can see that. And as I'm a parent, you're a parent, you just feel for them, and just the nature of his loss, just absolutely crushing. But you have to give them so much credit for the courage that they're now showing to take themselves out of their comfort zone and start talking about this, because they know that his life can now save other lives.
And I think that happens a lot with what we do in journalism. You don't hear about a problem or a concern until it becomes a news story. And then it creates awareness, and there's this whole domino effect. And I know they've been very involved in this law in North Carolina, and we'll talk about that after the break. But there were some actions, if I'm correct, that were taken by the Consumer Product Safety Commission after this. What did they do?
So there have been a number of recalls. I mean, thousands and thousands of residential elevators have been recalled. And the primary issue is, again, that space between the inner and outer doors. So the fix is not this huge fix. You're not having to rip out elevators. You put a safety guard in there. It's basically a space holder that blocks any person trying to get in between those doors, where that's where the danger is. And it's a very simple, relatively inexpensive fix. And through this recall, that's now in motion.
That's good news. So we will be back after the break with more from Cullen Browder talking about Weston's Law. That's next. Welcome back to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Amanda Lamb talking with Cullen Browder on a new law regarding residential elevator safety that passed last summer. And Cullen, it just went into effect October 1, right?
Correct.
Tell me about the law. What does it do and how did it come about?
So when Weston died, we covered it. It got a good bit of media coverage, and that resonated with the labor commissioner, Josh Dobson, with lawmakers. They started paying attention, particularly when they learned about, this is something we could fix. That's not going to overturn the industry or anything like that. And what's amazing, and I think you can appreciate this, is in this divisive time that we're in right now, it passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate. And what the law does is it requires an annual inspection, which was not the case before, and that is going to be paid by the homeowners. It only pertains at this point to short-term rentals. So if you own a home with a residential elevator, you never rent it out, the law does not apply to you. Now, the recall would apply to you if you have those elevators that are impacted. And that safety guard, that safety space that has to be placed between the inner and outer doors is required under this law.
And you touched on this in the first half of the show, but this is a pretty easy fix, and it's not that much of a burden on the homeowner. I mean, they have to, I'm sure, pay for the inspection and pay for the safety guard, but it makes a lot of sense.
Right. And I think when you consider the risk, when you consider what happened to Weston, what's happened to other children, it's really one of those common sense solutions. And the people who put the law together, they deserve some credit too, because they brought all the stakeholders to the table. The family was involved. Their attorneys got involved. The Labor Department was involved. The industry was consulted. So they didn't just throw something on the industry. What makes sense? What is reasonable? What can we do?
That's great. And like you said, nobody was against this, right? I mean, it sounds like there was a lot of support.
It passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate, which is almost unheard of, particularly in this day and age. But it also speaks to just something that was needed. Now, the recall, the Consumer Product Safety Commission had to do a lot more pushing and pulling to make all that happen. But again, between the two, it's literally going to save lives.
And prior to this, there was no regulation on residential elevators at all.
Just when they're installed, when you build a home, there's that single inspection, but nothing on an annual basis, nothing that required that space be filled between the doors where a child could unfortunately fit. So the law absolutely changed the game on that.
And I know Weston's parents have talked about wanting to see this type of law passed in every state, maybe even a federal law. What are they doing to that end?
So they were very pleased that it moved so quickly here in North Carolina, but that has not been the case in other states yet. There's no traction yet on federal legislation, but they're not stopping. They're from Ohio. This law only affects right now North Carolina. So they say they're determined to honor Weston's memory. the child he was. He was sensitive. He was kind. He had that childlike confidence, and they just want to honor his memory by continuing to push to try and get other what they consider common sense laws passed elsewhere.
You know, in our business, we have interviewed so many people who are victims of tragedy. Many times, both you and I have interviewed parents who have lost children. It never gets easier. I mean, how does this rank for you emotionally in terms of some of the stories you've covered?
Wow, it's just it's right up there with, you know, those emotional moments, because as a parent you think, okay, I can identify, but you can't. You cannot put yourself in that position at that level of grief, the pain, and how would you react? I mean, imagine every emotion: horrible sadness, anger, frustration. It's incomprehensible. And again, I see why it took them this long to get to the point where they would want to talk. If they never wanted to talk, I would completely understand that. But they saw a way to help, and I think that helps Weston live on. And I have a great deal of respect and admiration to them for that.
And hopefully some kind of catharsis for them
Yes.
to do this. Thanks, Cullen, for your continued reporting on this story and insight. And thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download and making us a part of your morning routine. Another way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting in your inbox every morning with Triangle news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. You can sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.